Hello everybody, and welcome back to my continuing series on Rahu and Ketu through the bhavas, or the houses of Vedic astrology. Before we get going, if you've been enjoying this series and you'd like a little bit of information on your own personal horoscope in regards to the placement of Ketu and Rahu in your own personal horoscope, I do offer something called the Intensive Consultation through my website. It's presently on special offer. If you're interested in scheduling, you can do that through the link that you'll see above. So again, welcome back to this continuing series on Ketu and Rahu through the bhavas, or the houses of Vedic astrology. In this particular video, we're going to talk about the placement of Ketu in the third house, which will obviously place Rahu in the ninth house. Before we get into that, my previous videos, and you'll find a link to the first of those videos right here, go into an explanation of how Ketu and Rahu function. But I'm just going to go over that again very briefly, just to give you a general idea, because I find quite often people get very intensively focused on how Ketu relates to the previous lifetime, and Rahu relates to what we're meant to do in this particular lifetime in order to resolve past life karma. And whilst Ketu and Rahu do and can relate to that, there's something on one level that's much more practical and easy to understand in this particular lifetime, which is Ketu will generally relate to something that's called the security paradigm. Now, what do I mean by that? A paradigm is a belief structure, something that we think is going to make our life function in the best manner possible. Or maybe we don't even think it's going to make our life function in the best manner possible, but we don't know what else to do. It's the tried and tested method that we keep coming back to over and over again because it's what we know. And in our mind, there's that age-old saying of it's better the devil we know than the devil that we don't know. So we tend to stick with the tried and familiar rather than exploring fresh territory. But when we kind of stay stuck with whatever Ketu's representing in the horoscope, eventually life begins to feel empty. It begins to feel like things aren't going anywhere. And it's at that time that it's Rahu's job to pull us in the opposite direction, to go explore new territory for the sake of bringing in a new understanding and integrating that back into the developing security system of Ketu, so that Ketu can ultimately provide the liberation from past worn-out modalities of relating to life or relating to consciousness that no longer work for us. So in short, the nodes are about our evolution, and they work in tandem in order to bring about that evolution. Sorry, I was talking about Andalusia earlier today with a client, and now I just kind of said Andalusian, so I meant evolution in that particular regard. So going into Ketu in the third house and Rahu in the ninth house, when Ketu is in the third, it's a little like this, right? When I was a child, we used to have this saying that we do back and forth with each other, where, there used to be someone who was a know-it-all, and they would go, "I don't think, I know." And then we would go, "Well, I don't think you know either," right? And even though, maybe that's not fair to kind of take everybody with Ketu in the third house and Rahu in the ninth and pin them into that particular category, a process that's very similar to that definitely comes into being when you have Ketu in the third and Rahu in the ninth. So Ketu in the third will tend to latch on to intellectualized belief systems. What do I mean by that? It's when we objectively think that something works a certain way, rather than having a first-hand experience of whether it will actually work in the way that we think it does, right? So we don't test out our beliefs. Instead, we just have like the knowledge or the concept, and we latch on to that concept, and we think that that's, the be-all and end-all, so to speak. when that happens, Rahu's job is to come and pull us into the other direction, where we are forced into situations where we're meant to test out our beliefs through our day-to-day experiences and see if our beliefs actually hold water, see if they're credible, or if they are, perhaps just dogmatic and stuck thinking that we need to allow ourselves to grow and evolve beyond. One of the ways that happens when you have Ketu in the third and Rahu in the ninth is quite often initially the individual, as they are exploring their beliefs, they'll either become very fanatical about their previous set of beliefs because they're trying to latch onto it for the sake of security measures, because to explore something that's completely new to them, it's a little bit spooky. So they'll latch on to those old belief systems and become distrustful of the new way of looking at things, until an experience comes along that's too deep and too profound to allow them to hold on to that old way of thinking. Either that, or in connection with that as well, when the new belief system begins to dawn upon the individual, they may do the very same thing that they did before, which is to latch onto that with almost a fanatical sense of belief or a fanatical sense of mission, thinking that this is now the only way. Whereas I know that the way that I used to think things were is no longer credible. Now I'm latching on to this is the new way of looking at things in the same fanatical way, without learning that perhaps they're being asked to be a little more open and equally a little more allowing for the personal cycle of evolution to continue. So in short, it's a pathway that repetitively brings into the individual's sphere of consciousness, for lack of a better way to put it, the need to try out their intellectualized belief systems. Intellectualized belief systems, and see if they are actually real and still hold meaning for them. When we go through this path of life, we're meant to evolve, right? And so sometimes we look at things one way and something comes in and completely makes us do a 180 and go in the other direction. And this particular path of the nodes is meant to take the individual on a path where they get into the space where it's no longer something they think, it's something that they know and feel in their heart. And then rather than being in that position of, I don't think you know either, the person can definitely say, well, I actually do know, and I don't just think, and I may not be able to explain it to you, but perhaps it's not important to explain everything that we believe. Perhaps it's okay to just know it, rather than to compare our belief systems to another's as somehow being superior, which can be a tendency when you have the nodes with Ketu in the third and Rahu in the ninth as well. Here are some other concepts that tend to pop up with this particular placement. The third house is also siblings, whereas the ninth house is parental influence. Quite often people who have this particular placement of the nodes, there can be a strong attachment to siblings, to their brothers or sisters, at the exclusion of parental influence. Perhaps a brother or sister was more of a connection during the person's childhood than the parents were. And so they never were able to develop that good mother figure or father figure energy, and at some point in their life they kind of have to come into contact with that particular factor, either through a deeper relationship with their own parents or through a relationship with their inner parents, so to speak, so that they're able to move past the sphere of taking everything that their siblings or associates might say as being the gospel, but instead moving beyond that to deeper sources of wisdom than perhaps they had access to. And quite often the way that attachment to whatever their friends or their associates might say as being the gospel, rather than taking their own path. Quite often that comes into being from not having that parental guidance that they needed when they were a child. In addition to that, you'll also find that this particular placement, connection is very important to these people, right? So they, above and beyond being in a long-term committed relationship, these individuals will find themselves in a position where just making sure that there is connection or several different friends that they can connect to in their life, that becomes a very important factor. But they tend to move from one connection to another, right? They'll spend time around one friend for a really long period of time. They'll find that that's getting worn out. They'll jump to another friend, and they'll tend to, for lack of a better way to put it, recycle their friends and their associates, rather than finding themselves in a position where they can get into deep and meaningful friendships, and in addition to that, deep and meaningful relationships. Quite often with these particular people, long-term committed relationships can be very difficult if there's not also that deep level of connection. So if they get into a long-term committed relationship and the connection side of it begins to fizzle out, they're going to need other people that they can connect with into their life, or it makes it so that the commitment then finds itself in a position of beginning to crumble. With this particular placement as well, the concept of effort versus purpose is also very important. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you've got a task that you have to do. You might find yourself in a position where you're going, well, I'm willing to put in the effort, but you do it in kind of a half, cocked kind of way rather than putting yourself fully into the task. These people are also meant to learn to develop the concept of making sure that effort is combined with purpose or meaning, right? You can go about a task, like I could sit here and, write these my daily lunar scopes or record these videos for you and just kind of talk in a monotone voice like this about Ketu and Rahu without any real sense of meaning or any sense of zest. Or I could go, hey, I'm really into this, which I am, and, find myself in a position where there's purpose behind my actions and not just a random process that one's repeating over and over again. Whatever the case is with this particular axis, key to the understanding of it is that concept of when something that is a thought or a concept or an idea becomes more than just objective. Thought, idea becomes subjective for people who have this particular placement. As the nodes mature over the course of their life, they become less attached to concepts and intellectualized belief systems and more deeply connected to something that they can commit to, something they can find a deeper level of meaning in. And they will find themselves in a position where they're consistently seeking for deeper and deeper levels of meaning, with the proviso that it's important for them to not let those deeper levels of meaning become etched in stone and dogma, because it's at that point when it becomes dogma that something has to come into their life and show, you know what? You don't have a full understanding, or your understanding is indeed limited. Here's a way for you to expand that. That's going to do it for this look at Ketu and Rahu in the 3rd and the 9th axis. And again, if this is something you're interested in exploring in your own personal horoscope, the house placements of Ketu and Rahu, or the Nakshatras they're in, or the signs that they're in, the intensive consultation is just what you're looking for through my astrological services page. It's presently on special offer this week, all the way up until midnight on Friday the 20th. And if you're interested in scheduling with me, you can do that through the link that you'll see above. Until next time, thank you for watching. Sometime over the course of the next week, please look for a full moon video. And in the meantime, please, as always, take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.